Pardon the wrestling, but I am Bryan, and today it's time to talk about Impact Wrestling. After the Impact, if you will. Impact on Access was last night, and it was a very fun show, but not only are we going to be talking about the TV show, there's been a lot of news within Impact Wrestling that we're going to cover today. But before we get started, if you like Impact Wrestling or any other kind of wrestling news, analysis, and whatever, hit that like button because that'll help others find this channel just like you did. And hit the subscribe button so you get more content just like this every single time we put out a video. Now, as you can tell, we are professional wrestling fans here, but we're also video game fans here. So what I want to let you know is that if you want a chance at winning WWE 2K23, stick around to the end of the video to find out how. So before we get into talking about Impact last night on Access, let's talk about the big news that Impact announced earlier this week, and that is they are going to be going to Australia. Yes, they have announced that they're going to be doing a 4-night 2-show tour in Australia coming up here in just a couple of months, and this is a huge deal for the Impact brand. Now, we're going to go over the press release here and give you a much more detailed version of what this actually means and what we can expect. So as I mentioned, Impact will be traveling to Australia for a 4-day 2-show tour, and they're calling this tour Impact Down Under. This will be the company's first ever events held in Australia, and Impact will be traveling to the city of Wagga Wagga, New South Wales in Australia for what is going to be 4 days of events, including 2 shows, a podcast with Conrad Thompson, and these will be on Friday, June 30th and Saturday, July 1st, both at the Equex Center. Now, I may be pronouncing that wrong. I do apologize, but this is a case of right place at right time if we're talking about Impact Wrestling. So, New Japan was originally supposed to be in Australia during this time, but due to issues outside of their control, including scheduling and talent availability, Impact got the call to take their place. In the press release, it is noted that Impact stars will have the unique opportunity to take on local professional wrestlers in the Australia area, which will be a great way to showcase talent that have not gotten the platform in the land of Down Under. The way this all came about is the New South Wales Government and Regional Events Acceleration Fund is funding this trip for Impact, and this fund is a $40 million fund that is part of a $2 billion regional growth fund. So this is designed to grow the local economies down in New South Wales. Now, I've not been able to find an exact amount that Impact is going to be making for this event because they're getting paid to go to Australia. It may come out in the future. If it does, we'll let you know, but this is a huge deal for Impact and its stars to be able to travel to a very different place that they're used to competing, and it's going to be able to give local talent a chance to shine. And there may be a diamond in the rough, if you will, someone that could get that platform to show that they are someone that needs to be looked at. Now, Australia has plenty of huge stars that have come from there. Rhea Ripley might be the most notable one that we can talk about in the current era. So Australia has a hotbed for professional wrestling that we may not know about, and this is a good chance for us to find out about it. So as I said, this is a huge deal for Impact, and it's going to be able to bring more eyeballs to the brand, especially live, and Australia getting a chance to enjoy Impact. And hopefully WWE will go down there for a premium live event in the near future as well. I know there's plenty of people who are trying to get more international events to happen for WWE, and if you watch Backlash, if you watch Clash of the Castle, and you'll see Money in the Bank here in a few months at London, this is good business. This is good for the wrestling industry to show that you can go to other places and bring a huge audience with you. And as we all know how All In is doing for AEW at Wembley, almost 65,000 tickets sold so far without a single match or talent announced. Wrestling is just getting bigger and bigger, and going international is going to just make the wrestling economy, if you will, boom. Let's talk about Impact on Access last night. Another good episode headlined by a Knockouts division matchup, and we'll get to that in a moment. But this was another part of the tapings from Chicago a couple weeks ago that I had the pleasure of attending. It was my first Impact show. And if you've been sleeping on Impact Wrestling like I have been, check it out. Whether it's on Access, YouTube, Impact Plus, whatever it is that you can watch Impact on. Give some time to the brand because they're putting on great matches every single week and putting together pretty good programs too. So let's talk about Impact last night. So the opening match was Killer Kelly versus Masha Slamovich. This was a pretty good match. She only got about 7 minutes, but watching this live, there's an amazing moment that I'll play over here while I'm talking. And there's a beautiful roll through from Masha Slamovich where she tried to get a pin attempt, and she eventually picked up Killer Kelly, pretty much a deadlift squat, and she brought her up into the crunchy. If you're familiar with Hangman Page's Dead Eye, the crunchy is Trent Beretta's version of that, essentially, where, as you see here on the screen, Masha will grabbed those legs underneath their shoulders and just slammed down for a pin attempt. Great near fall they had right there. Killer Kelly came back with a rolling Death Valley driver. It did not get enough for the pin. She did go for the killer clutch to try and take out Masha Slamovich, but Slamovich jumped off the turnbuckle and brought her into a pinning combination and won the match that way. But despite that, during the pin, Killer Kelly kept the clutch on and just tried wrenching it. And I see this program continuing after that finish, and I'm perfectly okay with that. We may see this match on Under Siege get it run back, and I'll be all right with that. After that, backstage, we went to Kenny King. He was pumping up Sheldon Jean. This was a follow-up after Kenny King confronted Nick Aldis in a backstage segment last week on Impact. So we're getting Kenny King and Nick Aldis at Under Siege, and we'll go over the Under Siege card in just a moment at this current moment. But after that, after the break, they recapped Trinity's debut from last week's Impact. And they had Gia Miller backstage interviewing Trinity. Trinity was asked about the open contract she put out there for Under Siege, and she also discussed the confrontation with Jordan Grace and Deonna Purrazzo last week. Jay Vidal interrupted for a selfie with Trinity, and this was probably the funniest moment of the night for me. Gia got a laugh out of me personally by answering Trinity when she was like, "Who is that?" And Gia's like, "It's just Jay. He works here." I don't know why, but the delivery from Gia just absolutely dropped me. It was funny as hell. But back in the ring, Kenny King was out at commentary for Nick Aldis for Sheldon Jean. It was a squash match. It was just a nice way to showcase Nick Aldis coming back to Impact, their first appearance on Impact television in 6 years. After that, went backstage to a segment with Dirty Dango. He was with Joe Hendry. Still trying to figure out who attacked Santino. They got interrupted by Zicky Dice and Johnny Swinger. Dirty Dango challenged Johnny Swinger to a match later, and Swinger here used something called logic. I know, logic in professional wrestling, it's kind of it doesn't happen all that often. All right, it's an oxymoron almost. But Johnny Swinger said, "You don't make the matches around here. You can't do that." And Dirty Dango's like, "You know what? You're right." So he calls Santino. Santino books the match for later in the show. So I love that. And what I also love is Dirty Dango and Joe Hendry, the pairing together. I think they're both together is just comedy gold. Joe Hendry's awesome. Dango just kind of doing his fashion files and Impact in a different way. Really great. I love it. Just keep it going. They did part 3 of Kazarian's sit-down interview after that. The big takeaway from Kaz in this one is that he's still going after the Impact World Championship. And Gia mentioned all of these things that Kazarian's done outside of going for the title. And she's like, "You're doing all these things, but how is your mind still focused on the Impact Championship?" And Kaz says, "That's still my goal, is to become the champion." And he wants to leave a legacy at Impact to help bring this brand up to where he thinks it should be. After that was Decay versus the Good Hands. John Skyler was cutting a promo, walking down to the ring. And he must not be paying attention to the world of sports, because he said that the Decay has just as good of a chance of winning this match as the Cubs do at winning the World Series. And while that may be true this year, I'm a Cubs fan, by the way. What it might be true this year, Cubs have recently won a World Series. I think the Chicago Bears winning a Super Bowl probably would have been a better put down here in Chicago. And as a Packer fan, I would have cheered that one. But anyway, this is a standard match. Brian Myers came out to interfere and help the Good Hands win. And we'll go into the Good Hands and Brian Myers a little later, because that will come back up. We had our champion, Steve Maclin, backstage with Singh and Shera. Maclin was running them down verbally because of the loss last week in the 6-man tag. Singh and Shera said that they're going to make it up to Maclin at some point. And they get back to another segment later, and they show that they're kicking Heath's ass. I mean, he's got kids. Why are you doing that to him, man? That's not cool. So after that, it was Maclin versus Rhino for the Impact Championship. This went about 10 minutes, and it went about exactly how you'd expect a match between Maclin and a 47-year-old Rhino would go. It was just there. It's just kind of another showcase match at length. Also to kind of put over Rhino that he's still a threat. He's there. He hits the gore. It could be over in a minute. But Maclin beat Rhino with the gore. And after that, he was focusing on Rhino's left knee throughout the match. He took Rhino to the outside, just kept beating the hell out of his knee. Eventually hit him with a chair repeatedly with it. Pillmanized his knee with a chair and used a shovel on the chair, which was a very interesting combination of weapons. And as I talk about this, you'll see that on the screen as well. During the break, Maclin found Scott D'Amore and outside of an ambulance that had Rhino in it, and they're arguing back and forth. And D'Amore said, "You know what? That match with PCO under siege, now it's gonna be no disqualification." And jumping out of the ambulance was PCO, so him and Maclin started beating the hell out of each other outside of Cicero Stadium. After that, it was Joe Hendry promo time. This was very funny because I remember this watching this live because I was there. And have I mentioned I was there at this taping? You can, if you can recognize me here on the screen, you can recognize me in this promo and other points in the show. But Joe Hendry mentioned that his nose, and I have to read this verbatim, "My nose has deviated 1.8 centimeters from the center," and you can literally see his nose just being kind of crooked. It's crazy. He said he talked to Michael Jordan and he was told not to cut his promo tonight. It's too dangerous. And Hendry said, "You may be an expert on shoes, Michael, but this is wrestling." And then after that, Joe Hendry introduced Dirty Dango, who ended up killing Johnny Swinger in a few minutes. After that, it was a segment backstage with the Design talking about Sami Callihan. And then Sami Callihan and Rich Swann showed up in yellow hoodies and beat the hell out of the Design. So we're heading towards that 6-man tag at Under Siege. Sami Callihan needs 2 partners. I'm just going to already assume that Rich Swann's going to be one of them. After that, Moose was asking Brian Myers why he helped the Good Hands because they've been teaming together. And Brian said that he could be a mentor for them. And I like this pairing. This should be interesting how this can go. And it's kind of a full circle thing for Brian Myers. You know, him and Matt Cardona started out as edge heads for Edge back in WWE, so I'm okay with that. We're getting to a point where you have some of these guys that are young talents 15 years ago. Now they're the veterans, and this is gonna be a fun little, I think, sidebar for Brian Myers. I like it. In the show, Kenny King versus Nick Aldis was made official, and then next week on Impact announced, and I believe this was also taped on the second night of Chicago. I wasn't there for that one. But we're getting Trey Miguel versus Laredo Kid. I'm very much looking forward to that match. And then we're going to have a 6-man tag match to preview our 6-man number 1 contendership match for the Impact Championship at Under Siege. It'll be Moose and Eddie Edwards and Frankie Kazarian versus Alex Shelley, Jonathan Gresham, and Yuya Uemura. So it's be an interesting 6-man tag. I'm sure it'll end in no contest as they'll all probably just beat the hell out of each other. After that, it was main event time. So it was Jordan Grace and Deonna Purrazzo versus the Coven for the tag team titles. This one about 10 minutes. It was a good match. I could watch this probably for another 5 to 10 more minutes. Taylor Wilde pinned Jordan Grace after Jordan was knocked into Deonna Purrazzo. The Coven double teamed Jordan and then ended up pinning her. So after the match, they were beating her down, and it was time to bring out Impact's newest star, Trinity, and she came out for the save. So good match here between the 4 women. I definitely could watch a little bit more. I don't think we'll see those 2 win the titles anytime soon. Especially we got the head-to-head matchup coming here at Under Siege between the 2, Jordan and Deonna. So another good episode of Impact. A lot of stories moved forward. A lot of stories started up. So we had like the Good Hands and Brian Myers coming together. Kenny King, Nick Aldis is hitting that next gear. I'm very much looking forward to that match. Nick Aldis versus Kenny. I think it's a perfect pairing to bring Nick back into Impact. And Kenny King is just, I think, one of the more underrated hands in professional wrestling over the last 15 years. So to see him in a high-profile match with Nick Aldis, who arguably maybe one of those what-if stories when it comes to, man, what if he had that chance in WWE or in AEW and had a bigger spotlight, if you will. And not, I'm not trying to put Impact down by saying that, but there's a difference here. And if Impact continues on this rise, maybe they start filling out stadiums, and who knows? Maybe we have 3 huge viable companies in America, and that'd be great. But another good episode of Impact, like I mentioned. We'll run down the Under Siege card here as it stands at the moment. So far, we have a no DQ match for the Impact World title between PCO and Steve Maclin. This is, I think, just going to be a way to showcase Maclin beaten on big star within Impact. So should be a fun match. No DQ, I think, is going to help the match a lot more. So that's probably going to main event. I don't see why it wouldn't. After that, it'll be the Knockouts World Championship between Deonna Purrazzo and Jordan Grace. And if Jordan does not defeat Deonna Purrazzo, she cannot challenge for the Knockouts title as long as Deonna is champion. After that, we'll see Trinity making her Impact pay-per-view debut. And she has an open contract, so we're not sure who will fulfill this contract. And I'm not sure if we'll find out before Under Siege happens or if we'll find out at Under Siege. I would imagine we'll find out at Under Siege. Nick Aldis, as we mentioned, will take on Kenny King. And then our number one contenders match for the World Championship will include Moose, Eddie Edwards, Jonathan Gresham, Yuya Uemura, Alex Shelley, and Frankie Kazarian. I'm going to make an early prediction here. Alex Shelley's going to win this one just because of that little promo backstage with him and Chris Sabin where he's like, yeah, I think I'm going to win the world title. So I think an Alex Shelley and a Steve Maclin program could be a lot of fun. I think eventually we'll have Nick Aldis versus Steve Maclin. I don't think it's time for that just yet. And of course, Aldis isn't even in this match. Kazarian, I could see possibly winning this too, but I'm not sure if that time is just yet. That might be maybe a program for the fall here in the future. X Division Championship match should be a banger of a match. Trey Miguel versus Chris Sabin. Speaking of bangers, we have a tag team title match that was announced actually earlier today, so this wasn't announced yesterday. ABC, so Chris Bay and Ace Austin will be defending their titles against Mark Andrews and Flash Morgan Webster, Subculture. So this probably will be your match of the night. Just can't wait for that one. And then the last match that we have announced so far for Under Siege is the Design versus Sami Callihan and two partners. Like I said, Rich Swann will probably be one of those after what happened on Impact last night. Not sure who the third person will be. So I want to know, who do you think is going to be Sami Callihan's partners? Let me know in the comment section down below. Now, that's all the Impact news I have for now. So I'm very much looking forward to the continuation of the build to Under Siege. Speaking of Under Siege, we will do a live review of the show, live review and reaction to Under Siege right here on the channel. So make sure you're subscribed and hang out with me and we can watch Under Siege together here on the channel. Enjoy all of this card and more. That's all we have announced so far, just 7-8 matches. That might be all we get. I'm all right with that. I think this is a good card, and we're gonna have plenty of good matches. King versus Aldis should be fun. Miguel and Sabin, the tag team championship match, of course, Jordan versus Deanna, and Maclin PCO is gonna be just a hell of a match. I think it's gonna be a fun fight between the two. Of course, we have the newsworthy debut of Trinity, so we'll see who ends up taking that open contract against Trinity. I don't think it's going to be anyone from the Coven. That would actually surprise me if that happens. I think it's going to be someone that might be slightly newsworthy, but still not sure exactly who. And if you did stick around to the end of the video, I do appreciate that. We mentioned how you can win WWE 2K23, so let's talk about that. So one thing we're going to do with WWE 2K23 is we're going to do an Impact Wrestling GM mode video series right here on this channel. Now, if you want to watch me do this live, you can go to twitch.tv/Bryan Evolved. Link will be in the description. I also have a YouTube channel at that same name where we'll do other sports video games content that's just separate of our professional wrestling stuff. Now, how can you win? All you have to do is subscribe to the channel, like this video, and then tweet at me in a pinned tweet that I have on my Twitter at Pardon Wrestling, and put a screenshot of you subbing to the channel, and you'll be entered into a drawing to win WWE 2K23, and we'll announce that winner during our Under Siege live stream. So again, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, turn the bell notification on so you can have that chance to win 2K23 and join us in maybe doing GM stuff, universe mode, and just enjoying another great wrestling game. If you're a fan of sports video games, or wrestling video games, or just video games in general. So again, I want to thank you for your support, and what match are you looking forward to at Under Siege? And let me know that in the comment section down below. Again, if you haven't already, like this video, because as I said, it will help others find this content just like you did. Thank you for sticking around, and we'll see you on the next one.